the Duke mark, and right before we took we had a comprehensive exam at the very end of our time there. And right before we took our comprehensive exam, which you had to pass before you could graduate, which graduation was the next day. So you already wore your cap and gown, and parents were coming. That was actually the next week. You know, and they say right before we take our exam, nobody's ever failed it. Well, that's a lot of pressure, but we all passed. But how many other students pass the licensure exam on the first try? That tells you something about the quality of the program. The licensure exam has gotten harder and harder, so don't expect 100% pass rate for universities, but you want in those high ranges. Compare what you find out. How experienced are the faculty members? Ask the question. Does their area of expertise match what you want to do when you graduate? So if you think you want to be in sports, do they have faculty that have those areas of concentration that you want to look at for a career perspective? Are there department or university activities in which you want to participate? Do you want to go to a school that has intramural football, softball, baseball teams, or do you want to go to a smaller school that doesn't offer that? Will the program link you with a mentor? When you get out, what are they going to do for you? Are they going to set you up? Are they going to help you establish yourself? What degree can you earn, and how long will it take to get it? That's an important consideration. What kind of clinical experiences are provided? So when you go to PT school, not only do you do your coursework, but then there's internships where you spend 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, 16 weeks, 20 weeks, depending on the university, how long those experiences are. So do they offer multiple, like 8-week rotations, or do they offer one giant rotation? Or, you know, and where do they send their students? Do they send their students to cool places, or are they all local affiliations? Remember, when you go out and do internships, you got to find a place to live, and you got to be there, and you got to be there for a period of time. So be thinking about those things. Talk to current students and recent graduates. Those are your best sources of information for what the experience is like. What is it like? What do you like? What do you dislike? How's it been for you? Would you do it again? Ask those questions. Once you become a PT, you have to be a graduate of an accredited physical therapy education program. This is very important. So when you look for a PT program, make sure it's not a PT program. Make sure it's got accreditation. And accreditation is by a thing called CAPTE, Commission on Accreditation of Physical Therapy Education. Just like Clemson is accredited, you want to make sure you graduate from an accredited university so that you can sit for your licensure exam. You sure don't want to do that and not be able to sit for your exam. PT candidates must pass a state-administered national exam for licensure. So once it's all said and done, you got to go sit for what we call those state boards. That is not the funnest day of your life, but probably one of the most important. And then once you get a license, never let it lapse, regardless of what kind it is. Don't think, oh, maybe I won't do that anymore. No, better to keep that license. State licensure is required in each state in which the PT practices. So if you work in South Carolina and decide you want to move to Alaska, then you have to transfer and get a license in the other state. I have friends who did traveling PT. When they were young, they got out of school, they were young and unattached, and thought, oh, I'll do this travel deal. So they signed up with a company, and they would be at a location for 13 weeks, and then they'd go to another location for 13 weeks. That's pretty cool. But every location that they went to, if it was in a different place or different state, they had to have a license in that state. There are specialties in physical therapy. You can become board certified in cardiovascular and pulmonary, electrophysiology, geriatric, neurological, orthopedic, pediatric, and sports physical therapy. So those are options when you get out that you can later specialize by doing additional work and residencies and other exams to specialize in an area. All right, yeah, the $60 million question. I shouldn't show you that. I don't know. With just a 0.2% unemployment rate, physical therapists are now experiencing the best employment conditions since 1997. One of my roles in our company is to recruit physical therapists, and they're not easy to find, which is a good thing if you're going into a job market in this economy. You want to have a job where it's, or a degree where it's easy to find a job. There's more than 172,000 PTs in the U.S. The median salary for PT is $75,000. I will tell you that there's a huge range. From a new grad, we'll make in the probably shouldn't tell you this thing. New grad will make in the 50s-ish. And then someone who owns their own practice is going to make way above that. So it just depends on where you are, how many years you've got, what you've been doing, what setting you work in, how many hours you work, that sort of thing. All right, just want to show you a quick video clip, and then I'll open the floor for questions. Anybody got a question while this is loading up? How to answer it them all.
About how much does it cost to go to PT school a year? What's the tuition? I'm sure it varies in private schools as opposed to public schools. And you also said, talked about in-state.
Right.
If you apply to, if you're not a resident of the state that you're applying, it's going to be more.
Yeah, and just
you
like
pay out-of-state tuition like you do college.
any graduate program, and typically, like your Western Carolina, for graduate school, they have an in-state graduate rate and an out-of-state graduate rate, and I cannot tell you what that rate is off the top of my head. I'd have to look it up. Does anybody know? Anybody check that? Anybody know MUSC's tuition this year? I haven't looked at it in a couple of years.
What about scholarship opportunities?
You know, that's one of the things, and I don't know what you guys find in scholarships as far as in your other careers, but when you get to graduate school, it's a little different from undergrad. There's not as many scholarships, at least based on academics, because everybody coming in's got almost the same academic level. So it's more of a need-based thing as well as loans. So if you need financial assistance, it's a little different than your undergrad scenario. So there are still some healthcare facilities that offer scholarships in need-based areas to get you to go to school and then come back and work there. Those used to be very prevalent. They're not as prevalent as they now than they were, but there are still a few of those. They're mostly in rural areas where you can go. They'll help you go to school in order for a work requirement when you get out. So scholarships, not like scholarships in the undergrad world.
One of the requirements is college math. Do you know, like, does that mean there should be certain elements in that class, like algebra, calculus?
I do believe it's algebra is the basic requirement, and once you've got that, you're good. Yeah. What else? Still not loading. It's being heavy. Yes.
Do you know if MUSC has a rolling deadline or a set deadline?
I do believe it's January 1st. It's on the grid sheet.
Okay, but
For
is that
application?
like just set? Because medical colleges
It's set.
have rolling deadline.
No, they do not have rolling deadline. It is one deadline,
Okay.
and I believe it's January 1st. Anybody see that? I'd have to get my microphone closer.
I don't have my glasses, so I can't read this.
January 15th.
Looking at your thing that you printed out for us, some of the schools don't have like required volunteer hours.
That's right.
Are they still probably looking that you had experience though, that you had some amount of hours?
It always helps you on your application. So what they're looking for is, have you explored this as a career, and do you really know this is what you want to do? So some of your universities require it. Some of them just require it. Some of them require a certain number of hours. And then some don't require it, but it's always recommended so that they see that you've explored the career.
And are they looking for any type of documentation when you get those hours?
For those of the schools that require a number of hours, they are looking for documentation of that.
Okay.
If they just require the experience, they're typically looking for a recommendation from that location that says that you did volunteer in their area. So the more you got, the better.
I'm not sure if you know, but do you know how much weight the admissions process puts on, like, the GRE scores? Is it more of like a formality, or is it pretty competitive.
GRE's one of those, kind of like when you get into undergrad, it's kind of one of those, it'll get you, it's kind of a there's a cutoff, and they're looking for a specific percentage, and then they, then they're looking at the rest of the application, but that's kind of one of those hurdles. Now, score-wise, couldn't tell you what that is, and it varies depending on, where you're going to apply and how rigorous, how many people are applying to that place. Let me show you this video, and I'll be glad to answer one question.
Now you gotta remember, watch the weight through the right side, so you really have to push a lot through your left.
Physical therapy represents a life-changing event for Carlin Duplace, not from a medical standpoint, but from a career standpoint.
I used to work in television in production and programming, and I was in New York during 9/11, and so it just kind of made me rethink some things. So I kind of outsourced and saw what was out there, and I ran into physical therapy, and it was a perfect match.
After watching what went on around her during 9/11, Duplace felt the need to find something in which she could truly help people. So she left a network career, got a degree from Clemson, and a master's from UCF.
It's so fulfilling being able to have the knowledge and skills to bless other people with in order to help them return back to the way that they used to be, or as close as possible.
Physical therapy like this takes knowledge and ingenuity. Sure, there are repetitive exercises involved, but Duplace also has to piece together what a patient's home life will be like.
As you drag it, tell me what you're picking up.
A deodorant, shaving cream.
In my mind, you're going back home. You're going back to your community. Let's get you functional to do that. What good is raising your leg 10 times if you don't know how to open the door and get inside your house or things like that? So I really try to incorporate that.
And that can make her job a bit of an adventure.
It definitely is, because everyone is different. No two people have the exact same house, the exact same condition, the exact same age or abilities. So everyone's definitely very different.
Duplace initially saw physical therapy as a good fit for her because it's an active job in which she gets to directly help people. But it turned out to be a field with much more opportunity than she realized.
There are so many opportunities, either in an outpatient setting or here at the hospital or in skilled nursing facilities. I was shocked at just how many different opportunities, let alone overall the sum, but just all the different ways that you can go into the profession.
It's a profession that allowed her to change her life while changing the lives of others. I'm Alicia Callanan Nandigo for your help.
Your best source of information for getting additional information is apta.org. There is a section on there, it says, to the left says students. You click on that, then you go to the undergrad section. It will direct you to all the different items, schools, that sort of stuff, as far as getting additional info. Okay, so I talked a lot. What do you need to know? Yes.
Is it harder to get into a public physical therapy program if, like, I'm from Tennessee, so is it going to be harder for me to get into, say, MUSC because I'm out of state?
Yeah, just kind of like undergrad.
Okay, so that's the same for like every public?
For state-based schools, they obviously weigh heavier on your in-state students. For private schools, like a Duke or an Emory or Vanderbilt or whatever, it's fair game. Just to give you a big, now Duke's program is much bigger than when I applied, but when I applied, there were 785 applicants for 24 spots. So, pretty competitive. Now the classes tend to be a little bigger than those, and depending on where you're applying, depends on the number. Obviously, like a Duke or an Emory or Vanderbilt or somewhere is going to have a big, giant population that applies because they see from the whole country. What else?
What do you consider gave you the most competitive edge as far as getting in Duke?
There were a couple of things. things. The Clemson degree